While I fought with the zipper of my crimson dress, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The zipper would not budge no matter how forcefully I pulled it up. I could feel the stress rising as my nails dug into my hands. Benjamin remained in the shower as the clock struck 9 o'clock. As I mumbled to myself, I couldn't contain my excitement any longer. Before we departed for the event, I still hadn't finished fixing my hair and applying my makeup. A disappointed groan from me as I lowered my hands to my sides. I could make out Benjamin's outline through the steamy shower window. After a brief pause, I quietly went to the restroom door and knocked. "Is that you, Benjamin?" With a slight quiver in my voice, I yelled out. Unfortunately, my comments were overshadowed by the sound of the water running. I had my doubts about whether he could hear me. A voice from behind me startled me as I stood at the door. "Alberta, what's the matter?" There was Gail. In that 1 second, my entire being froze. I cautiously spun around to see Benjamin's dad coming out of his room in my direction. A pair of gray pajama pants and a laid-back t-shirt were his attire. "Oh really? Where is the zipper?" With my voice scarcely audible, I murmured something. My face turned red and my body swelled with heat. The unzipped rear of my garment caught Gail's attention. Do yourself a favor and watch this video all the way to the finish if you enjoy stories like these. If I were you, I would make sure you didn't miss this story. The following events are worth reviewing. I get it. With a little smile gracing his lips, Gail spoke. He continued walking toward me while stuffing his hands into his pockets. "Do you need my help?" "Yes, it's all right, I'm grateful." My response was prompt. However, not even my own words were enough to persuade. Once again I attempted to zip up the garment independently, but this time, I was even more clumsy. My heart was racing and my hands were trembling. After a brief delay, Gail crept softly behind me. No big deal, really. As he reached for my back, he whispered something. I could feel his icy touch through my dress as his fingers traced across its delicate fabric. I held my breath and went absolutely limp as Gail reached for the zipper. His fingers were so cold that I could feel them through the thin fabric. I clenched my fists and hoped the uncomfortable moment would soon be over. "It appears to be jammed," he whispered. My dress's fabric cinched up as he pulled on the zipper, nearly propelling me forward as it pressed against me. Even though my voice was shaking from anxiety, I told him that if he pulled a bit harder, it could work. Behind me, I could feel Gail breathing, and my heart was racing so rapidly that it resounded in my ears. While pulling the zipper tighter, Gail mumbled something about how difficult it was. Out of nowhere, there was a clatter. The zipper came undone. My crimson dress threw off my shoulders and landed on the floor at that very moment. I was gasping for air. I stood there, my body paralyzed with awe, staring at the dress that had gathered around my feet. Every part of my body was on display but for my panties. "Oh, Alberta, I'm really sorry," Gail remarked with a deep, worried voice. I remained immobile as he knelt down to retrieve the garment and extended it to me. I felt frozen, a victim of the present moment, with no idea how to proceed. Out of nowhere, the trickle of water from the shower ceased. That was turned off by Benjamin. An overwhelming sense of panic swept over me. In a flash, I snatched the garment from the floor, folded it over my chest, and spun around to confront Gail. "Please, let's pretend this didn't happen," I whispered, my voice quivering. Gail gently nodded and avoided his gaze. I clutched the fabric close to my body, my trembling a testament to the weight of the uncomfortable atmosphere. I quickly mumbled something in response and bolted out of the room, not meeting anyone's gaze. When I got to my bedroom, I leaned against the door, breathed deeply, and shut it behind me. Attempting to collect myself, I remained there for some time. Emotions were swirling around in my head. How does something as insignificant as a stopped zipper cause such an unusual predicament? Was it merely a strange twist of fate or an implausible coincidence? Luckily, Benjamin hadn't seen a thing since he was still in the shower. I decided to not waste any more time and retrieved a plain black dress from my closet. Here, zippers are not used. Returning to the living room, I straightened my hair after a brief check in the mirror, regulated my breathing, and got dressed. Benjamin, as always, exuded an air of effortless charisma at the event. His self-assured delivery held everyone's attention. Observing him made me feel proud. Meanwhile, Gail was rather friendly and sociable, smiling slightly whenever she glanced my way. Although those looks didn't appear unusual, I couldn't get the knot in my chest to go away. Benjamin appeared very weary as we returned home. Laying back on the bed, he began to discuss his agenda for the following day's work. Curled up next to him, I gazed up at the ceiling. Looks like things are back to normal now. The tempest within me, however, remained unattended. Among the persons I've known, Benjamin was among the most dependable. His esteem for his father was indicative of his family's importance to him. He persuaded me to move in with Gail so that I might have someone to talk to, something I had consented to as it held such significance for him. Even at 65 years old, Gail exuded an aura of command and experience. His charisma shone through, belying his years. My turn came next. I possessed an irresistible charisma that seemed to transcend my years, according to a 38-year-old woman. I was cognizant of that. No way could it not be. But after tonight's bizarre experience with Gail, I found myself wondering about topics I hadn't considered before. The sound of Benjamin's rap between us. One link. I had no idea how sturdy it was. It was irrelevant, though, in that instant. I felt like I was teleported to another planet as we talked. As I moved, the delicate nightgown fabric rubbed against my skin, causing a swell of uneasiness. Little white pajamas. I was confused about what was making me feel uneasy, or maybe it was just the way Gail's strong, fixed stare was fixed on me. But for some reason, my concerns diminished. I was calm for an instant. Even more so, I experienced safe. My mood was lifted by Gail's subtle humor and his witty, biting mocking. Just then did it hit me how natural a conversation with him was. Our discussion flowed easily and organically. There was a profound sense of understanding between us that I had never experienced before. Just sitting there, taking it all in, trying to make sense of what was going on. Something profound within me was aroused by it all. It was far too easy to ignore the little voice telling me to be careful and instead concentrate on Gail's. Furthermore, there was a brief moment when Gail was so near to me that almost everything was known to me. The meaning appeared to extend even to the airy fabric of my nightgown. The drink was merely a pretext, but I couldn't resist taking another taste. An escape from reality that will not allow the present moment to pass me by. Alberta, Gail whispered with a hint of nervousness. I raised my brow and met his gaze. Something had changed in his expression. The distance between us seemed to be gradually decreasing. I leant in slightly, almost gladly at that moment, though it was something I was ashamed to confess. Still, I could feel a voice pleading with me to quit. His presence brought a sense of peace and understanding, and even though I was well aware of what was happening, I found myself engrossed in the here and now. So much had happened. Not hard. You couldn't help but feel the gravity of the situation just listening to Gail's voice. In the kitchen there was a thick stillness, thick with tension and a tug of some sort. Without averting her gaze, Gail inhaled deeply and offered me a subtle smile. It became clear to me as his words flowed that he had been suppressing this for some time. Some aspect of that instant stood out. On that given day, while your garment tipped over. Alberta, I just can't seem to shake it. With a steady yet purposeful tone he spoke. I felt an unsettling sensation arise within me as his words reverberated in my ears. Whatever the case may be, but somehow I found it enjoyable. I felt a surge of something new just thinking about that time. My pulse was racing because I felt like he was paying attention to me. As I battled to suppress these emotions, I met Gail's gaze with a blend of astonishment and reluctance. Uncertainty about his words and actions ensnared me, though as the calm I'd experienced minutes earlier was profound. Something was evident in his eyes. His breath became palpable as he approached. At that same moment I was completely confused about my next move. Part of me wanted to intervene as Gail leaned in, but he continued nevertheless. My speech became choppy as my ideas began to jumble. With a step closer he thereafter. We locked lips. There was a sudden change in everything. I felt like I'd been whisked away to another planet since everything was going so fast and so incomprehensible. I was also wondering a lot of other things. My activities. For what reason I was engaging in it. The time seemed to stretch on forever, even though it only lasted a few seconds. My brain went into a tizzy. My voice quivered as I frantically withdrew back, asking, "What am I doing?" I attempted to compose myself when I noticed a glint in Gail's eyes. Next I needed to decide what to do. I was at a loss for words, both for what had transpired and how to put a stop to it. "Hello, Gail. I am your stepfather. This is the thing." I said something along the lines of, "This isn't right," my voice thin and labored. Just getting it out on paper helped me see things more clearly, but my shaking voice and troubled expression said it all. Such a complex moment defies explanation. Everything shifted, though, in that 1 second that night. I felt threatened by Gail's advances. It has left me bewildered, and all I want to do is ignore it. However, an additional factor emerged. A dread. It is unfortunate. And above all else, Benjamin. An overwhelming sense of unease washed over me all of a sudden. As I pondered the situation, I couldn't help but think, what would Benjamin do if he found out? Do you even know? As if someone or something were attempting to wrench me out of those thoughts totally, the words became lodged in my throat. The next step is what? So what's the latest? With the passing of each second, the volume of that voice in my head increased until it seemed as though it was yelling at me. As a result of the sheer magnitude of it all, I felt helpless and vulnerable. I briefly glanced across at Gail and noticed a change in her expression, but I quickly moved on. Going to my room was my next move. Whatever the case may be, I was determined to take action. I bolted for the upper floor, banged the door shut, and sat there emotionally entangled. I wished I could somehow erase all memory of Gail and her actions. The question is, how? What chance do I have of ever letting this catastrophe escape my thoughts? And last but not least, Benjamin. Our partnership. All that we possessed. At this point, what was to happen? Gail eventually left him alone after realizing he wouldn't get what he wanted. I zoned out and remained silent for quite some time. However, the unease I felt within persisted. Benjamin returned home the following day. The change in the air was tangible to Gail, and I knew it. However, it seemed like the final straw had been broken at that particular moment. I felt compelled to confront Benjamin, spilling the beans about Gail's actions. It was going to be difficult. I heaved a sigh of relief when Gail eventually departed from the house. But the internalized feelings of shame and guilt began to chip away at me day by day. I failed to comprehend Gail's expression or my own emotions at the time. In the end, though, I yearned to alter my situation. The idea of having a child. From the start, Benjamin had been discussing it. A long-sought desire of his. I chose to be receptive to the concept as well. I eventually let go of all other concerns. I wished I could just shut it out. I decided to keep going, to give things time to improve on their own. I sunk as far as I could into my friendship with Benjamin to conceal that error and my bewilderment. Neither Gail nor I were ever forgiven. I reassured myself, though, that I might get over my symptoms in due time. Then there was the infant. Yes, having a child was our decision. It was time for us to change course in life. Ignore entirely? You have no idea. However, though, forever I will bury that night. Absolutely everything. It was as if the world had turned upside down. Life continued on as if nothing had transpired following Gail's actions that night. Things would sort themselves out, in Benjamin and my opinion. However, I could never shake the feeling that that error lingered in my subconscious. Forget about that night. But every time I thought about the past or Gail's name came up, it was like going through it all again. Putting it out of my mind, I forgive myself. We didn't have it made. Benjamin's desire to start a family was something we had discussed from the beginning. He had suggested that we start a family. A sense of relief washed over me as I said yes. Perhaps things will get better in due course, I reasoned. An infant. We could start over with a child, couldn't we? At this point, everything else was moot. We had a child after some time had passed. However, chaos reigned once more at that point. It all came rushing back as the thought of Gail dropping by to visit his grandchild crossed his mind. His expressions. How he affected my emotions. The idea of him being here with us holding our child is overwhelming. After all my efforts to break free, it seemed like it was going to drag me back into the clutches of my past. The terror. The uncertainty. With each passing day, it expanded slightly. My anxiety was heightened once again by Gail's fascination with our grandchild. Whenever he held the baby, I thought I could make out that familiar expression in his eyes. It brought back a painful memory that I wished I could just erase from my mind. Everything seemed natural to Benjamin. However, the nagging sensation remained. I was helpless in the face of that overwhelming fear. That day eventually arrived. In order to meet his great-grandchild, Gale visited us at our residence. How much did his grandchild mean to him? Or were those sentiments from before you really felt anything for me? A jumble of conflicting feelings welled up inside of me as I thought of his former gaze. Billy wasn't at home. Our little group. I had hoped to put that memory to rest. That I had progressed. Those lingering sensations of disquiet, however, were now rising to the surface. What am I to do? When were we going to have another moment of alone with Gale? Were we going to witness a sea change in our grandchild? Plus one additional item. Could it be that that night had completely slipped Gale's mind? Or did something else come to mind? Is there a secret plot behind it all? These questions had no clear answers. Absolutely not even I. And I'll admit that I was still confused about what to do. You must have been moved by my narrative if you have continued reading this far. More information is available. You will not want to miss a single detail, believe me. To share your opinions on this story, click the follow button, enable alerts, and post a comment. I am eagerly awaiting your feedback. So I say we discuss it below. I am incredibly grateful for your support.